whole body. Village or whatever. A suburban mall. How about now? John Lady and Yoda.
Hello, everybody. So we're gonna go ahead and get started. And I want to thank the library for hosting us. Joe from the library and the Eccles library.
Have to speak up.
Okay, my bad. How about now?
Better.
So Joy and I are from, and I'm Malachi, by the way. Joy and I are from Utah Climate Advocates, which is a club here on campus, you know, obviously related to climate advocacy, as the name would imply. And we kind of just, we see the inland port is related to the climate through carbon emissions and increased transportation in the valley and through all these other environmental issues. And we just wanted to make sure that that conversation was happening here on campus and kind of bridge the gap that often exists between environmental groups in the community and students here on campus. And we did that, you know, we partnered with the library and they're generously hosting us. And we brought here Deeda and Jonny, Vasic, who Joy will talk about a little bit more in a moment. And we got our funding for all this pizza and free food from Skiff, so thank Emerson and everyone involved with the Skiff program in general. And I also, involved with that program, I need photos. You guys care if I take a photo? Any objections? Okay.
Well, Malachi does that, I just also want to make, before I introduce the wonderful speakers that we are honored to have with us today, again, we just want to thank the Eccles Health Sciences Library and the wonderful staff here who have been such a great support in making this all come together. For today's event, for the forum, we're first going to be hearing from Deeda. Deeda is a senior Utah campaigner for the Center for Biological Diversity. Deeda worked for 10 years for the Southern Utah Wilderness Alliance, where she organized support for Utah's Red Rock Wilderness. Over her 30-year career as an activist and organizer in Utah, she's worked on a wide range of social justice, civil rights, and environmental issues. She also served a 4-year term on the Salt Lake City Council and was Chief of Staff and Communications Director in the administration of Salt Lake City Mayor Rocky Anderson's administration. And Deeda has been a driving force for the Stop This Polluting Port Coalition, a group of concerned citizens, communities, and organizations asking Utah's elected leaders to stop the polluting port. Deeda will be covering a lot of the environmental impacts of the inland port. After her comments, we'll be hearing from Jonny Vasic, and he will be covering a lot more of the health implications within the inland port. Afterwards, we'll have a short Q&A, so feel free to please save your questions for that period, and they'll both be able to field some of those.
Do you want to? We're going to show you a video to sort of ground the conversation. This is a video that Jonny produced and directed, and it'll give you an overview of the issue.
Yeah, it's about 5 minutes, so.
The Salt Lake City School District is speaking out about the controversial inland port. That's a 15,000 acre or so area in Salt Lake that will serve as a hub or port to collect and redistribute goods from trains and trucks.
Governor Herbert signing SB 234, establishing an inland port authority with jurisdiction covering about 20,000 acres of the city's northwest quadrant.
The future of the inland port causes a heated debate at the state capitol. Troopers confronted and forcibly removed environmentalists protesting the proposed inland port.
Dozens of people in the hallway yelling, "Abort the port!"
You can expect an influx of thousands upon thousands of diesel trucks, trains, and equipment that all operate off of diesel fuel, which emit diesel emissions. So you have the impacts to community health, respiratory health, cardiovascular health, and general greenhouse gas emissions.
the jobs that are associated with ports, we've learned, are not good jobs. And people are frequently hired on a temporary basis for very low hourly wages. There's a new Amazon facility that just opened up in this area. They started paying people $12.50 an hour. That's not a livable wage, it's not a good job. We should be subsidizing private industries that are basically, getting rich off of our tax dollars. Great Salt Lake is considered a globally important bird area. The inland port sits directly in the flight path of the 10 million birds that use Great Salt Lake annually. From an environmental standpoint, this port could not be situated in a worse place. This is a good example of a wetland area in the port that could go away, that could disappear as they fill in the area and attempt to make the land stable enough to be able to build structures on it. It just poses a multitude of engineering problems. I think that all the citizens of this valley and this state should be very concerned about this project.
Virtually everyone who lives on the Wasatch Front recognizes that we already have a serious public health hazard in our air pollution. We're very concerned that this inland port proposal will make that even worse. From thousands of studies published in the last 15 years, we know that air pollution has virtually the entire list of health consequences that smoking cigarettes does. And that includes diseases of the lungs, the heart. It includes poor birth outcomes. It includes cancer. And it even includes things like type 2 diabetes. Salt Lake City is not in desperate need of an economic stimulus. We are in desperate need of clean air. We're talking about likely thousands of new diesel trucks on our roads every single day, making our freeways more congested, making them more dangerous, increasing the pollution.
The project is not going to be a clean project. It's going to disrupt the natural environment. It's going to disrupt your community.
Everyone in Utah should care about this issue because it's going to affect all of us. From impacting the quality of life in our communities to impacting how our tax dollars are spent. We all have a stake in this fight, and working together we can stop the polluting port.
So we have every reason to believe that this port is going to make the air quality of Salt Lake Valley even worse than it already is. We have these masks that are pollution masks, but they also light up if the pollution's bad. And when they go red, as you can see, that means that a particular matter is especially bad. What we want to do is we want to unmask our city and stop the polluting port.
Okay, so that gives you a broad sense of what we're talking about. And now we'll go into a little bit, if I can plug this in. We're going to go into some of the details from when the Inland Port bill was passed in 2018, and it was a very rushed effort.
Oh, check it.
This video.
Okay. All right. So. This is the area that we're talking about. It's very beautiful. It's undeveloped. There are about 7,000 acres that are north of I-80 that are directly adjacent to bird habitat of global importance. But first, what is an inland port? So an inland port is a freight transfer facility, and ports, there aren't any clean ports in the world. They're all dirty. This is a picture of the Port of Los Angeles. The Port of Los Angeles and the Port of Long Beach are two of the major sources of air pollution in Southern California. So our port, an inland ports, this is a picture of the inland port in Illwood, Illinois, which is probably one of the largest inland ports in the United States. And it is basically a wasteland full of warehouses and diesel trucks. The community, the little community of Illwood, Illinois, did something similar to what we're doing here. They provided tax subsidies to the property owners. In this case, it was the Burlington Northern Santa Fe and then some very large warehouse builders. And what they found in the intervening years is that they have not reaped any of the benefits from this. In fact, it's really destroyed their communities because there are so many diesel truck trips now going through their communities. It's created health hazards in terms of diesel pollution, but also just in terms of the increased truck traffic. And the trucks are also destroying the roads. So inland ports are not inherently good things in any way. In fact, they come with lots of harms. What our legislature is saying is that there'll be economic benefits from this, but we haven't seen any evidence of that. In Elwood, Illinois, the jobs are called perma-temping. People get temporary jobs in these warehouses, and the employers are creating these jobs as temporary jobs, so they don't have to provide a living wage or benefits to people. So there's actually labor organizing happening here to try and improve the working conditions for the people that work in this inland port in Illinois. Here's another picture of the landscape that we're trying to protect. Our situation is such that 7,000 of the acres that are being considered for development have never been developed before. And the harm that would be caused by development is pretty significant, just from the basic climate emissions that come when you build new buildings on land that's not had buildings before, to the kinds of uses they're contemplating, which, as I said, really it's a lot of warehouses and diesel trucks. There's a herd of antelope out there. Every time I go out there, practically I see the antelope, and it's really heartbreaking to think that we're going to be destroying their habitat. That's happening right now. This is a burrowing owl. It's very important burrowing owl habitat out there, and burrowing owls are a species that's in trouble. I don't know if you all have heard that we've lost 3 billion birds in the last 30 years. Mostly this is because of habitat loss. And certainly building an inland port on this undeveloped land that is riddled with wetlands and playas is going to contribute further to that habitat loss. I think these are marbled godwits. One of the things about this area is that it attracts over 10 million birds a year, come through here from over 300 species. And because of climate change, saline lakes around the west are drying up. So Great Salt Lake is the last best place for many of these bird species, and we're seeing entire populations of certain species showing up here, which means that if we screw things up significantly, we could lose entire populations of bird species, which is just horrific to think about. Okay, so in 2018, the Utah legislature took over the area in yellow. That little blue rectangle is an old landfill that is controlled by the State Institutional Trust Lands Administration. And the rest of the land is pretty much privately owned. Rio Tinto, the giant mining company that owns Kennecott, is a major landholder in this area, as is an entity called the Colmena Group. And so the line running through here is up there is I-80. And that land, you know, the blue rectangle and everything beyond it, that's the undeveloped land that is so critical that we want to see remain undeveloped. There's absolutely no reason except pure greed to develop beyond, to develop in that area. So people have been eyeing this land, this undeveloped land, as our population grows and undeveloped land in Salt Lake County is in short supply. And some of the ideas that they've had for what they want to build here in terms of an inland port are pretty horrific. So there's an oil and gas lobbyist who showed this map, which is, this is the undeveloped land, and his idea, the idea he was pitching to the Uinta Basin Energy Summit was to put a giant transloading facility right adjacent to the critical wetlands, and then have a whole area riddled with train tracks and warehouses, et cetera, et cetera. And then he had a plan also to have some giant, to have an oil tank farm out here for the refineries. I mean, it was just bad idea after bad idea. But that's kind of what we're facing here with this project, is that these lobbyists for the energy industry and developers are scheming about how they can use this land to make money. They're not really thinking at all about the environmental consequences. So if I can get this to move forward. So this next slide is, thing is stuck. We'll show you, okay, so this is what these warehouse developers wanted to do. They wanted this giant rail yard to be on the land that Sitla owns, and then they want warehouses all in there. Here's what we came up with. We just released a report last week, or was it last week? Recently. Where we analyzed how many new truck trips would come from this area being developed with warehouses. And again, this is the undeveloped area. And up there, that box is where they're putting the new state prison. So 11,600 new truck trips per day is our conservative estimate, and 23,000 new car trips. So, you know, that's 34,000 new vehicle trips onto the I-80 corridor, which is not prepared at all to handle that volume of traffic. And just think about the pollution from all those vehicles. After the inland port bill was passed, we started organizing right away. So this was 2 years ago. And here you see some community members. Actually, the woman in pink is a Republican who supported Governor Herbert. She lives in the Rose Park area. She was so mad about the inland port and how the legislation creating the inland port was passed on the second to last day of the legislative session at like 9:30 at night with 20 minutes of debate. It was rushed through. And she was so upset about it that she came, we did this little press event where she brought Governor Herbert her Governor Herbert for Governor, or Herbert for Governor t-shirt back to him. Stop, this is terrible. Well, the governor ended up signing the bill, but he wrote a letter saying that there were problems with it. And yes, indeed, there are lots of problems with it. The person who was pushing this the hardest was former House Speaker Greg Hughes. he wanted to put himself on the Port Authority board, but hadn't read the legislation very carefully and didn't realize that he was disqualified because of the conflict of interest language in the bill from serving. And so he instead put one of his deputies, Francis Gibson, Representative Francis Gibson, in his place. So there's an 11-member body that is not accountable to us, that is now making decisions for the Port Authority. And one of the big issues that we've had, this is a Pat Bagley cartoon. I don't know if any of you are familiar with Breaking Bad, but apparently that's Walter White. He's cooking meth for the Inland Port Subcommittee. They're just not transparent and accountable. We tried to get them to open up their subcommittees, and they said, no, we're not going to open them up. And what we're learning is right now, even as I'm standing here talking to you, they're making deals behind closed doors with developers to build things out there. Okay, so why is it a terrible idea? I'm going to let Jonny get into the air quality stuff because he's more expert than I am. Harm to wildlife habitat is a huge concern. And here are some of the amazing birds. I mean, this is an amazing landscape. Once it's gone, it's gone. And I personally believe this is worth defending. Who else has a herd of antelope within the boundaries of their city? How amazing is it that we have 10 million migratory birds coming through our city every year? We should honor this and respect it and leave it alone. Not all growth is good. And the only people who are going to benefit from this are the developers. And I'm here to tell you, Rio Tinto had a $13.8 billion profit in 2017. They don't need any more money. And they certainly do not need us to subsidize their development out there, which is their whole pitch. So the climate change implications of this project are huge. Because as we're learning, just building things creates greenhouse gas emissions. But when you factor in the uses of this proposed port, it's a carbon bomb. It's a disaster. And here's a diesel truck. So one of the other issues, of course, is the quality of life concern. And the communities that are immediately adjacent to the port are West Side communities, Taylorsville, West Valley City. Those are communities that are going to be hit the hardest, but all of us will be hit by this. We'll lose this amazing wildlife habitat. We'll have additional pollution from all of these diesel trucks, increased traffic congestion, loss of, it just goes on and on. There's really nothing to recommend this. So we've been organizing very diligently for the last 2 years. We created a coalition called the Stop the City Port Coalition, and it's a people-powered campaign. This is a picture of a conference that we hosted last February to educate people about what's happening. We've been tabling at community events. We've been attending every single meeting of the Port Authority Board. We've been hosting, here our friends at the Salt Lake Air Protectors hosted an event that we participated out on the site of the port. More young people at these meetings testifying. As you saw, there's been civil disobedience as a part of this. I took these pictures at the state capitol. I have to say the Utah Highway Patrol were really quite brutal with the protesters. It was very disturbing. We met with Mayor Biskupski to talk about Salt Lake City's litigation. Salt Lake City is suing the Port Authority and the governor over who gets to control the land use in the area. It's a narrow lawsuit that doesn't get at all of our concerns, but certainly we would like to see the Port Authority be taken out of this equation because of the lack of transparency and accountability. Here's a picture from a July protest that was on Washington Square and out in the Chamber of Commerce building. Here in August, we ended up having to take our fight to Salt Lake City because unfortunately, Salt Lake City in its rush, in 2016, the city got wind of the interest the state had in taking over this land for an inland port. And so the city, from that point on, was really rushing to show the legislature, we can do an inland port. Salt Lake City can do an inland port. Don't take it from us. And from our perspective, that was a mistake. The city should not have been saying we can do an inland port. We don't want an inland port. But back then, nobody really knew what an inland port was. I mean, I'll ask you, did you all know what an inland port was when you first heard, like, what the heck is this? So anyway, the city was rushing along, and the developers really took advantage of the city's rush. And Salt Lake City entered into a development deal with Rio Tinto and the Comena Group to develop that land north of I-80 as warehouses. And the developers, Rio Tinto and the Comena Group, told Salt Lake City that the land could not be developed without a subsidy in the form of tax breaks. So unfortunately, in August, in spite of over, I don't know, we probably had 150 people show up at City Hall to speak against the port and against this tax break, the Salt Lake City Council voted for it. They apologized and said they didn't have a choice, which I'm not sure that's true. But anyway, we've got a fight with the legislature, and to be quite frank, we've also got a fight with the city on this. So this is a press conference that we held in, there's Jonny, in like, I want to say October. And this is on the site of that warehouse development because they're building warehouses out there right now, not on a huge scale. We think we can contain it. But the problem is they're building these warehouses without any special environmental protections, no analysis of the air quality impacts from the trucks associated with. They didn't do any of their environmental due diligence, and the developers are just skating into the middle of this fight and getting their way, and it's extremely problematic. So we would like Salt Lake City to walk back their support for this development out here. Let's see. Okay, so last week, or whenever it was, very recently, we released a report where we had volunteers who have expertise in different areas of concern write about those concerns. And we're going to be taking our report to the legislature. Next week, on Monday, we're having a rally. Here's our rally. Sorry. A repeal the port rally at the state capitol on Monday from 4 to 5. And this is really the kickoff for our legislative advocacy campaign, where we're going to be talking with legislators throughout the 45 days about the harms from the port and how we want a do-over. We want this to be repealed. We need to rethink this. There's so much bad that can come from this that has not been thought through. There's another aspect of the Port Authority's power, which was just given to them last year, where they could create satellite ports throughout the state, and from our perspective, that just increases the harm. One of our concerns is that they're looking at 12,000 acres in Tooele that's undeveloped land for a satellite port, which is like, that's almost as big as the Salt Lake City port. And that would be, you know, something like, I don't know, over 25,000 acres between Tooele and Salt Lake City dedicated to warehouse uses and polluting uses. And that's all in the same airshed. So, and here's the thing, we're finding out about this not through open meetings, but because people are filing GRAMA requests, Government Records Access Management Act requests, to get this information. So it's deeply alarming that behind the closed doors, you know, people are plotting and planning to expand this even further, and the public has no information about any of it. So with that, I think I'd turn it over to Jonny, and he could tell you about air quality stuff and things that I missed. Oh, okay.
That was very thorough. Thank you for having us here today. I guess I'm supposed to turn this on, although I talk pretty loud, so. Hello? I don't know if that's doing much, but yeah, thank you for being here and coming out for free pizza, and then also maybe to hear us talk about this issue. Thank you for the vegan pizza, whoever included that, I appreciate that. I'm the executive director for Utah Physicians for Healthy Environment. Our main goal is to educate and advocate for clean air and other environmental issues. We try to do that through science and fact-based studies, peer-reviewed papers, that kind of thing. We have a lot of doctors. We're probably the biggest doctor group on the West Coast. Though you don't have to be a doctor to be a part of our group, you just have to love to breathe clean air, essentially. So we have this saying that says, ask your doctor if clean air is right for you. And if your doctor says no, you should probably look for a new doctor. So Deeda covered this really thoroughly, so I'll skip quickly through these first slides. There'll be some repetition, thank you. And like they say, that's the mother or father of skills. So this is the name of our report on the inland port. It's a tongue twister, and you can find that at stopthepollutingport.org. Obviously, as you can tell from Deeda and where I'm going with this, we are not pro-port. We have some serious concerns. So Deeda kind of covered this bit of it, and I'm just going to jump through to the main issues we have, like Deeda talked about, whether it's air quality, or no accountability, or quality of life, or climate change, or Great Salt Lake issues. And one of the things, even with the Great Salt Lake, besides the ecology of it, which I'm a big animal lover, and I love our natural environment, but as the Great Salt Lake drains and dries up, we have some serious health concern issues with dust mitigation and migration. And silica and heavy metals are included in the Great Salt Lake because it has no outlet, which is why it's a salt lake, and it's been there for a long, long time. And as the wind kicks up, it's very windy out there a lot of the year, that dust can settle into your lungs in the form of silica, and it's very hard to purge, and it's very unhealthy for you. So not only do we love the Great Salt Lake for that benefit, but the less water in the lake, the more dangerous it is for us living here in the Salt Lake Valley. So I was going to say, the question of air pollution and a significant source. So the Port of Los Angeles is going through multi-billion-dollar mitigation right now to undo all the damage they've done. Jack Hedge, who's the executive director for our proposed inland port here, used to be working there in commercial development. And so he and I have gotten into it a few times about how are you going to do anything better here than there. And it's a serious issue because, like Deeda said, there is absolutely no clean port on this planet. There's no such thing as a clean port. The technology just isn't there yet. And at the end of the day, only tool they have really is tax giveaways and tax incentives. They can't mandate anything because it's private land. In the Port of Los Angeles is responsible for as much pollution as 480,000 cars. And that's about half the cars that are on the roads here in our place in Salt Lake City. So, you know, obviously we don't want to end up with a place that looks like that. Not only because it's ugly, but because it's bad for our health. So an additional 11,600 daily truck trips, like we mentioned, would be only if the port's half developed of its size of the 16,000 acres. So that's a lot more truck trips. That's about double the truck trips as we already have. And the problem with that is it creates a lot of pollution. Even if the port is partly electrical, we're going to have a lot of pollution problems from diesel-powered trucks, train locomotives, and air cargo. And trains are a real problem too, because most trains, especially the ones here, the short pullers, are water-cooled engines. And anytime it's 40 degrees or lower, those trains run 24/7 because they don't want the radiators to freeze. So during the winter time here, we have a bunch of trains down at the UP, Union Pacific transloading facility, which is sort of our port that we already have. Some of those haulers run 24, as does the front runner. They don't stop. They'll go 6 months a year without ever turning off. So one thing to consider is you hear a lot about 40%, 50% of the pollution comes from mobile sources. The Department of Environmental Quality talks about this a lot, and there's always like a car icon. It's always blamed on the car. And while cars are a big source of mobile pollution, not all pollution is created equal. And diesel pollution and pollution from factories and wood burning are way worse for you as a pollutant than the car exhaust is. And the car exhaust from our cars is making up more like 20% of our pollution. And when Tier 3 gas and modern vehicles, and as vehicles are being retired and newer vehicles are coming online, that's going down. The actual mobile source emissions from cars in Salt Lake has been going down a little bit, but those are mostly from federal standards that the previous administration put into place, which are now being rolled back. So we anticipate seeing a spike again in mobile emissions. So when we're talking about mobile emissions, we're talking about PM 2.5, and this is the particulate matter that's 2.5 micron big, and it's smaller than a human hair. It's super small. You can only see it under a microscope. And when you look under a microscope, it looks like a piece of barbed wire. And it gets into your lungs and deep into your lungs, and it's virtually impossible to purge this out. And so it's really important to not try to get this in your lungs, and this is being held suspended all, you know, in pollution that's blowing across. Health effects of pollution are severe, and they are in many ways similar to smoking risks. A lot of the same diseases you get from smoking, you get from air pollution. Cancer risk, cardiovascular risk, skin irritation, respiratory, headache, fatigue, stroke, all of these things can come from air pollution. This is a pretty interesting shot of someone's lungs. So this is a non-residential rural resident in clean air on the left. And this isn't a smoker on the right. This is just someone that's been breathing unhealthful air. And if you look at that and a heavy smoker, they both look similar on the right-hand side. This actually was a study done in Sydney, Australia, was where that was from. So thousands of studies have been published, and the evidence is pretty clear and pretty alarming that air pollution, like I said, similar to cigarette smoking, you'll shorten your life expectancy and you'll have a premature death. You can expect to take anywhere from 1 to 5 years off of your life for exposure to air pollution. So we estimate maybe up to 2,000 people probably have a shorter lifespan and are dying prematurely in the Wasatch Front every year. So another type of tons of diseases, lung, liver, kidney, high cholesterol, you name it, can all come from air pollution. There'll be some hope at the end of this. I'm not trying to bring us all down and depress us. And in addition to that, air pollution, the other concern is pesticides. And Deeda already mentioned some of the beautiful animals that are out there. The inland port is absolutely the worst place you could possibly build. Not only is it windy, but like Deeda mentioned, there's a lot of it's wetlands. And Salt Lake County already spends millions of dollars to mitigate mosquitoes every year. They're gonna have to spend millions and millions more to mitigate the mosquitoes. In the video I showed, that was me with a couple of people riding our bikes out there, and we were covered with mosquito bites by the end of it. And they're building a new prison out there. It's way over budget. They're gonna have massive problems trying to spray that area to keep everyone from getting eaten alive by mosquitoes, as well as it's a very difficult place to build because of wetlands. So in mosquito, or I should say, the chemicals used to kill insects are super bad for us as well. There's a lot of health effects, from obesity, believe it or not, to cancer, to heart disease, to birth defects, reproductive issues, neurological issues, all can come from these chemicals they use to spray for mosquitoes. So essentially, as you can tell, I'm not hiding the message. I want to stop the polluting port from being built. Some more, we love Bagley. Some more Bagley. So one of the things is we've been trying to talk about this for over a year, close to 2 years, and the Port Authority just won't listen. Our elected officials just won't listen. And out of this has come a lot of blowback from, this is a people-powered movement. And so we're trying to figure out what we can do. What are the next steps? Because we've gone on record, we've had dozens of op-eds published, we've spoken out about it, and we've got to take it to the people. We've got to get people to realize that we don't need it in inland port. It's going to be super unhelpful for us. It's bad for pretty much every aspect we can think of, like Deeda was talking about. And so things we can do is you can attend a rally, you can sign our petition on stopthepollutingport.org, you can write a letter to the editor or an op-ed. Believe it or not, people still read. I mean, most of you probably read on your phone. I still sometimes read an actual piece of paper. You can join a group, volunteer, get active, become educated on the issue like we're doing today. You could become an advocate, and then simply by altering our behavior as well, by carpooling and taking mass transit and riding your bike and walking, all those things I think can help us put it where we are. Attend our rally. Some of the things you hear is like, well, the port's being built anyway. It's happening anyway. It's building out there, so we need to manage it. And that's just sort of a false scenario. I mean, the transloading facility we have out there now is only 60% capacity. They can easily expand and bring in more goods. They talk about, well, it's because we're all ordering online from Amazon. That's why we need this, because the goods have to get somewhere. But the reality is the port's not about servicing the local economy. The reality is the port's about a hub for sending goods overseas. And it's a hub for the Intermountain area, so all of those states can send stuff to us and then we can ship it overseas. So there's not really a good response. It's kind of one of these things. Why is it happening? We all breathe the same air. When I started this job, I was like, this is going to be so easy. Like, we all want to breathe clean air. How is that a partisan issue? But apparently it is a partisan issue, and there's a lot of money to be made and a lot of power to control. And so, when you follow the money, it starts becoming more clear why this is happening. And you and I are not going to benefit from an inland port. It's only going to hurt us having an inland port, essentially. So you can go to the Stop Polluting Port. You can email me if you want more questions, or Deeda and I are happy to speak anywhere and talk about this issue. And I'm a chatterbox, and I can go on for a long time. I have a whole nother bunch of slides on health, but I don't want to belabor that point. And I think we want to open it up to questions at some point. So Deeda has to come back up here.
Yeah. It's okay. It's okay. Go ahead and ask your questions.
So I don't remember. Did the bill pass the Utah legislature such that there is not approachable by an engineer? So it's enough with the majority?
Yeah, it passed with a supermajority. We're looking at our options in terms of what we could do potentially within Salt Lake City. And we haven't done a complete analysis of what our options are in terms of some kind of ballot initiative or I think we're out of referendum territory, but we could do. We have some options there. And we're also, I will say, we're also looking at litigation strategies. There are likely to be violations of the Clean Water Act and the Clean Air Act. And so there's also the potential need for a full-fledged environmental impact statement. Those are all things that we're looking at. Where we are right now, though, is that the Port Authority has not put forth a business plan. They keep moving the date back. And so now we're being told there'll be a business plan in April. Until we see that, we don't really know what they're intending to do. And that's part of our problem in responding. Was there a question over there? And then, yeah.
So that was my question, was about the environmental impact statement. Can they go and start building without any kind of environmental impact statement?
Well, the way they're doing it right now, these warehouses that were green-lighted by Salt Lake City are being evaluated on a project-by-project basis. And this is actually a way to get around Clean Water Act requirements. Because if you look at one warehouse in isolation, it doesn't look that bad. But if you looked at the 50 or 60 that they ultimately want to build, that cumulative effect would be quite appalling, but they're not doing it that way. They're doing it one by one. And so we're going to have to work to make that, to get that changed. The other thing is for an environmental impact statement, those are authorized under the National Environmental Policy Act, and so there's a legal framework that requires a federal nexus. And we have not seen the federal connection yet. It may come in the form of money. It may come in the form, like federal money for this. It may come in the form of impairment of waters that are managed by the Army Corps of Engineers. So we're still exploring our options there.
Yeah, without the federal money, it's really hard for the NEPA to sort of kick in.
Yeah.
So in a way, it'd be good, in a weird way, it'd be good if they wanted to add another rail yard or something, because that's federally, controlled.
And if they
authorized.
And if they do go for another rail yard, which has always been the plan with this, which kind of supersizes everything, there likely would be a full-fledged environmental impact statement. Any other questions? Lee, and then in the back, yeah.
I just wanted to make a couple comments, because my name's Lee. I've been following Deeda for some time and various groups
He's a heckler.
that are opposing it. Yeah. And I also recently have come up to the university and started taking some classes, particularly in the geography area. And under the area of what you can do, when the business plan comes out, as they pointed out, there's no environmental impact study yet, but there is going to be requirements for analyzing what the effects are going to be. In the House, they've tried to pass bills to put in more monitoring equipment for the air. It hasn't passed yet, but at least it's getting heard. But in my classes here, something I'm seeing is numerous professors talking about how they are setting up monitoring. In one class, our assignments to look at monitoring equipment that's already here in the valley and look at CO2, and potentially there are other things available. But getting the additional people here working to help set up and helping do the monitoring could be invaluable in helping. Likewise, they may have a need for professional expertise when it comes to analyzing things. That exists here at the U. And I've heard There are two groups that I've been hearing about that have started, the Future Clinicians, and there's an environmental group, and I'm sorry I don't know your name. But those two groups have the capacity to focus students and hopefully interact with professors to provide expertise that could be invaluable in supporting the whole idea of the port's bad for you, what's it going to do to you? Future Clinicians, I already had one visit. There was one presentation, I think it was a Dr. Honda, who described exactly what's happening in your lungs due to air pollution, due to the ppm 2.5. That type of information, getting that out to the rest of the world is invaluable in helping people understand what this port is.
Yeah, interestingly, to expand on what Leah's saying, last year they tried to do a monitoring bill, and initially it was for PM 2.5 light and noise, and it got watered down to where they did pass a bill to monitor in the inland port to try to get a baseline of pollution. It was meant to be up here at the U under Dr. Daniel Mendoza. At the end of the day, the DEQ pulled it back, and they're only putting in 2 monitors that are not EPA certified. So it's woefully inadequate because that's a massive area for only 2 monitors. And I'll just say, just from our doctor's point of view in my group, there is no safe level of air pollution. You know, it's a real misnomer when we see, oh, it's a yellow day, it's only bad for sensitive groups. Now, it may be worse for sensitive groups because they're already sensitive, but it is bad for everyone. It's a cumulative effect. It's not like, oh, it's a red day, so as long as I avoid that, I'll be okay. There's a massive study that came out last year, even pollution in small doses, especially air pollution, is super, super unhealthy, and it accumulates over time. So you will become one of those sensitive groups eventually. It doesn't affect everyone exactly the same way, but in the summer we have ozone problems now, which is as dangerous. This study came out that people breathing ozone on even low levels is like smoking 1 pack of cigarettes a day for 29 years. So we need to do everything we can from keeping the air getting worse. And this is to us and the coalition. We have 20 groups involved with this and thousands of people. This is the most pressing issue this is the worst legislation we've ever seen. The most pressing issue in the next 20 years, easily. If we want to keep Salt Lake City livable, we have to stop the polluting inland port.
Well, in the back, and then you.
I have a couple comments. My understanding is also that with all the construction of the proposed warehouses, et cetera, there's going to be a lot of runoff into the lake, and isn't that going to kill the brine flies and therefore drive off more birds?
Yeah, that's a huge concern. And they haven't done, like the stormwater pollution prevention plan is not comprehensive, so we're enormously concerned about that, yes.
And doesn't the Corps of Engineers have some control over the lake?
They do, and they have control over the wetlands. Unfortunately, things are highly politicized right now with the Army Corps of Engineers, and they are very afraid of this project. So we've been told we're going to have to FOIA them for Freedom of Information requests to get what they've been doing in this area. We know that they've been issuing permits, but part of the problem is they're issuing the permits on a case-by-case basis, so there's not a comprehensive landscape level analysis, so that's a concern to us. Also, there are people who, well, it's a little bit complicated, but I'm learning that there are people who do these wetland analyses, they don't do a good job. And so we've got a lot of problems that we're looking at associated with all of that.
My second comment has to do with federal money. Seems to me they're going to have to be building, I drive 201 and 5600 West a lot, and they're already starting to widen around Bangor, the highways. But doesn't that require federal money to work on those highways? Well, that's a way in.
Yeah, I think the transportation stuff is a way in for us, you're right. Yeah.
Because it takes a lot of federal bucks to build those highways, and they're gonna have to build a lot in the Midwest corridors going in.
Right.
And I imagine that's federally funded.
Yes.
So that needs to be addressed.
Yeah. One of the challenges, I mean, you've heard, we're a mostly volunteer-led organization. Jonny and I are the only people who really are paid to work on this right now. And so we're going to be, as he said, engaging in some fundraising to hire some experts to help us with this. But we also, as Lee said, could definitely benefit from volunteer experts from the U. We really need all the help that we can get to fight this. We're fighting the biggest, most powerful entities in the state, wealthiest. Well, Tim and then.
Just curious, top 2 things that an individual can do to help.
What would you say, Jonny?
It's tough. I mean, honestly, reach out to your elected officials and come out and show your support. So it's shocking the amount of few calls an elected official would get. Like if they got 10 in a day or even a week, that would be a lot to them. I mean, email's great, Facebook's great, but actually showing up to their office, lobbying them, calling them, showing up to our rally on Monday, signing the petition online, all of these ways that this is a people power movement. It's, you know, as we saw with the tax reform recently, it wasn't until 150,000 people signed that petition in a month that they got scared and pulled it. So this is doable, we can stop this, but we need everyone's help. So I have stickers over there if you want to repeal the port, make your voice heard. There's some flyers. I'd encourage everyone to come out Monday.
We're going to give people lawn signs to take home from the rally.
We'll have some fun. We got the Slick Rock Strangers singing a couple of songs, and so it's not all doom and gloom, you know.
It's going to be a festive rally.
Yeah, a festive, depressing rally.
Thank you for your questions. Thank you for coming. We're at our time. Feel free to linger longer if you're able to, and grab some more pizza on your way out. And then if you have any quick questions, I'm sure Jonny and Deeda would be happy to field those.
Linger longer.